Pick it up." His voice was ice, the kind that makes your spine lock up. Daehyun Choi, Kingston Prep's untouchable king, stood over me with those predator eyes, pointing at his pencil between our lab stations. Every student in chemistry froze. This was the test. The moment that determined your entire social existence at this school. Everyone picked up the pencil. Everyone bowed. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No. But wait. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand. They'd warned me about Daehyun before I even walked through those gates. Don't look at him. Don't challenge him. Definitely don't refuse him. So why did I just commit social suicide on my first week?" Here's where it gets crazy. This is the story of how I, Nyla Monroe, scholarship kid from Oakland, accidentally destroyed a king's empire and built something better in its place. And if you think you know how this ends, trust me, you don't. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to witness will leave you breathless. Let me rewind 48 hours. Let me show you exactly who Daehyun Choi was before I ruined everything. 7:43 a.m. Every single morning, the Obsidian Mercedes pulled into Kingston Prep's drive with the precision of a military operation. Dehyan emerged in slow motion, 6'1", cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, eyes like black coffee that kept you awake at night for all the wrong reasons, and the entire school shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Underclassmen changed their walking paths. The senior class president deliberately slowed down to avoid having to acknowledge him first. This wasn't respect. This was fear wearing a designer suit. "Good morning, Daehyun," came the chorus from the girls by the fountain. Ashley Park, Jessica Tam, and their rotating cast of hopefuls. He didn't even glance their way. Acknowledgement implied equality, and at Kingston Prep, Daehyun Choi had no equals. But here's what nobody knew yet. That perfectly constructed empire, it was about to meet a wrecking ball named Nyla Monroe, and the pencil incident, that was just the beginning of how I dismantled his world. Kingston Prep was where California's elite sent their children to network before inheriting empires. Tech moguls' sons, entertainment industry daughters, old money that made new money look like pocket change. Daehyun's family owned half the commercial real estate in 3 counties, but he'd built his own empire here, brick by brick of carefully cultivated terror. His phone buzzed. Group chat labeled, "Court." Sunho. "Professor Kim is sick. Free period first block." Daehyun didn't respond to the group. He sent one text. "Northeast study room, 20 minutes. Commands, never conversations." Now here's where my story begins, and it starts with me having absolutely no idea what I was walking into. Because the moment I stepped onto that campus, I became his biggest problem. I just didn't know it yet. I stood in front of the administration building on my first day, studying the Gothic architecture. Deep breath, Nyla. You've got this. I wore the Kingston Prep uniform like an afterthought. Blazer oversized, tie loose, vintage pin that definitely violated dress code. The truth? I was terrified. New school. No friends. Scholarship kid from Oakland Tech entering a world where kids drove Mercedes and wore watches worth more than my aunt's car. But I'd made myself one promise. Fear would never make my decisions again. "New girl," someone whispered. "Transfer from public school. She's in Daehyun's calculus section." That name again. Everyone said it like a prayer or a curse. But wait. He was watching me at that exact moment. And what he saw in those 30 seconds, it would haunt him for weeks. Daehyun stood 50 feet away, frozen. This new girl did something he'd never seen. She stood, completely still in a river of rushing students, utterly unbothered, not checking her phone, not scanning for familiar faces, She looked content, complete unto herself. "That's weird, right?" Jimin said. "She's just standing there." "I didn't ask," Daehyun replied. But his eyes hadn't left her. Then Nyla moved. Purpose without hurry. Like someone who knew exactly where she was going, even though this was clearly her first day. Interesting. Our first real interaction happened in AP Literature, and I accidentally declared war without even trying. What I said in that classroom would make me either his greatest enemy, or something far more dangerous. AP Literature. Room 304. Too much natural light and too many students who thought reading symbolism qualified them as intellectuals. Daehyun arrived exactly 3 minutes late. His signature entrance. Mr. Brennan had learned years ago that fighting Daehyun meant losing. "Ah, Mr. Choi, how generous of you to join us." Daehyun moved to his usual seat. Back row, window side, perfect sight lines. That's when he saw me. 3 rows ahead, left side. I'd removed my blazer despite the air conditioning, revealing rolled-up sleeves. I took notes with a fountain pen, looping, confident cursive. "Today we're beginning power dynamics in literature," Mr. Brennan announced. "How characters assert, maintain, and lose power. How societies create hierarchies." Perfect timing. "Miss Monroe," Mr. Brennan said, "since you're new, perhaps a fresh perspective. Did you study power as a literary theme?" I set down my pen. My voice carried effortlessly. "We studied how people confuse power with respect, how they think fear and loyalty are the same thing." I paused. "It's a recurring theme in literature because it's a recurring delusion in life." The room went silent. Several students glanced back at Daehyun. But here's the thing. I wasn't even looking at him. I was just answering the question. And that ignorance of his existence, it drove him absolutely insane. Mr. Brennan's eyebrows rose. "Interesting distinction. Elaborate? Power is taken, respect is earned. Characters who forget that difference usually end up tragic." I picked up my pen. Basic dramaturgy. Everyone stared at Daehyun, creating an uncomfortable spotlight he didn't appreciate. "Well," Mr. Brennan said, delighted. "Miss Monroe and I will get along splendidly." The class continued, but Daehyun heard none of it. He studied the back of my head, watched how I leaned forward when Brennan made interesting points, noticed how I underlined passages with that fountain pen. Who was this girl who walked into his kingdom and delivered philosophy lessons without fear? But wait, it gets better. Because in calculus, I made it even worse. Calculus was more of the same. Mrs. Park droned about derivatives. I entered 4 minutes late, completely unbothered, and took the front row center seat, the one everyone avoided because it meant maximum visibility. When Mrs. Park wrote a problem and asked for volunteers, my hand shot up first. "Miss Monroe, it's the chain rule applied twice. The derivative is 6x times cosine of 3x squared." Mrs. Park blinked. "That's correct. Have you studied this?" "I like math," I said simply. Daehyun leaned forward. The girl was either remarkably confident or completely unaware of social dynamics. At Kingston Prep, being smart was acceptable. Being visibly smarter than others was not, especially not on your first day. By lunch, the whispers had started, and what Daehyun saw in the cafeteria would crack something open in his chest. The cafeteria was a social battlefield disguised as a dining facility. Seating arrangements told the real story. Athletes west side, theater kids northeast, academic overachievers by windows. Dead center, prime real estate visible from all angles, Daehyun's table. It stayed empty until he arrived, a throne awaiting its king. He entered at 12:17 p.m., Sunho and Tyler flanking him. Heads turned. Silence rippled outward. Then he saw me. I sat alone, at a table near the library entrance. Not hidden, not isolated, just separate. Paperback novel propped against my water bottle, eating a sandwich I'd brought from home, completely absorbed. I looked utterly unbothered by the fact that everyone around me sat in predetermined social groups. "Is she serious?" Tyler muttered. "Nobody sits alone at Kingston Prep." "She's new," Sunho offered. "Doesn't know the rules." Daehyun said nothing. But as he sat at his table, as the court assembled, as the cafeteria returned to normal volume, his eyes kept drifting back. Something about my solitude looked less like isolation and more like choice. And that bothered him more than it should. Here's where it gets crazy. Because the test was coming. The pencil incident that would change everything. And when that pencil hit, the floor, I had exactly 3 seconds to make a decision that would define my entire Kingston Prep experience. Chemistry. Dr. Morgan's class. Daehyun worked alone in lab, as always. The teacher had stopped assigning him partners years ago after complaints that partnering with Daehyun meant doing all the work while he took all the credit. Not entirely unfair. Today's experiment, titration, precise measurements, careful observation. He was measuring sodium hydroxide when his pencil rolled off the bench. It landed exactly between his station and mine. For a moment, he simply looked at it, then at me, then back at the pencil. This was a test he'd performed dozens of times. Drop something. Wait. Watch them scramble to retrieve it, to perform this small service, to acknowledge the hierarchy. Pick it up, he said quietly. Not a request. A command. I glanced down at the pencil, then at him. My heart was hammering. Every instinct screamed, just pick it up. Don't make waves. You're new here. But I'd made that promise to myself. No, I said simply, and returned to my titration. The lab went silent. Students froze. Eyes darted between us like spectators at a car crash. And Daehyun? He felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Confusion. Excuse me? His voice dropped lower, dangerous. I carefully recorded a measurement, handwriting steady. When I finally looked up, my brown eyes met his without flinching. I said no, it's your pencil. You dropped it. Basic cause and effect. I capped my pen. Is there something about that logic you need me to explain? Someone gasped. Actual gasped. Daehyun stared, trying to process what had just happened. Nobody said no to him. Not ever. The word didn't exist in his interactions. Do you know who I am? Even as he said it, he recognized the pathetic cliché. Daehyun Choi, junior class. Your family owns Choi Holdings. I returned to my experiment. I can read a directory. What I can't understand is why you think I should pick up your pencil. Dr. Morgan cleared his throat. Mr. Choi, perhaps we should focus on the experiment. Daehyun bent down smoothly, retrieved his own pencil, and stood. His face revealed nothing. But inside, something had shifted. Cracked. Now here's what you need to understand. That moment, it wasn't just about a pencil. For 30 minutes, he was aware of exactly one thing. The girl 3 feet away, who had just rewritten every rule he thought governed his world. By the end of day, the story had spread like wildfire. And Daehyun? He couldn't stop replaying those 4 words. Is there something about that logic you need me to explain? He sat in the Mercedes as his driver navigated traffic. Usually, he spent this time monitoring his kingdom's digital territories. Today, he stared out the window, replaying that moment. Her voice, calm, unbothered, rational. Her eyes, utterly unafraid. Nobody looked at him like that, as if he were just ordinary. His phone buzzed, the court group chat exploding. Jimin. Dude, are you okay? Everyone's talking about chemistry. Tyler. That was wild. What are you gonna do? Sunho. She's dead. Social suicide. Nobody recovers from that. Daehyun typed, nothing. Then deleted it and put his phone away. The truth? He didn't know what to do. His usual tools, intimidation, social pressure, orchestrated isolation, felt suddenly inadequate. You couldn't intimidate someone who wasn't afraid. You couldn't isolate someone who seemed content alone. But wait. Because while Daehyun was having his existential crisis, his court decided to take matters into their own hands. And what they did next would force Daehyun to make a choice. Remain king of an empire built on fear, or become someone entirely new. Tuesday began with a declaration of war. Jessica Tam and her circle had decided I needed to be taught a lesson. Hierarchies needed enforcement. Challenges needed consequences. When I sat down at my usual table at lunch, I found it transformed. Milk spilled across the entire surface. My backpack, which I'd left there, sat in the puddle. Papers soaked. Books ruined. The cafeteria buzzed with whispers and poorly concealed stares. I stood very still, looking at the destruction. Then I did something unexpected. I laughed. Not bitter. Not defeated. A genuine laugh, like I'd discovered something amusing. Here's the truth. I'd dealt with worse at Oakland Tech. Way worse. This was amateur hour. I pulled napkins from the dispenser and began calmly wiping down my backpack, completely unbothered. Jessica watched from 3 tables away, confusion flickering across her face. This wasn't the reaction she'd anticipated. There should have been tears, anger, something. And Daehyun, watching from his throne? For the first time in his reign, he felt something uncomfortably close to shame. He hadn't ordered this, hadn't even suggested it. But it had happened in his name, because of him, and everyone knew it. I gathered my salvageable belongings, tossed the ruined papers, and walked out with my head high. The message was clear. You'll have to try harder than that. But they did try harder. Wednesday escalated fast. Wednesday morning, I arrived to find my locker vandalized. Go home, scratched into the blue paint. I stood there for a long moment, tracing the letters. Other students gave me wide berth, afraid of guilt by association. Then I walked to the administration office and requested locker reassignment paperwork. This is harassment, Mrs. Chen, the vice principal said. Do you know who did this? Does it matter? My voice was tired. Will you actually do anything about it? Her silence was answer enough. By Wednesday lunch, I'd stopped sitting in the cafeteria. Daehyun noticed immediately, though he told himself he didn't care. He found me on the bleachers by the soccer field, reading that same paperback, eating another homemade sandwich. I didn't look sad, didn't look defeated. I looked peaceful, and somehow that made everything worse. Thursday brought the final escalation, and this time Daehyun would have to choose who he really was. He was leaving AP Literature when he heard raised voices. Ashley Park's sharp tone. Think you can just show up here and disrespect him? This isn't some public school where everyone's equal. Daehyun rounded the corner and froze. Ashley, Jessica, and 2 others had me backed against the lockers. Not physically threatening, but the intent was clear. My expression was granite. No fear, no surrender, but something harder than before. I haven't disrespected anyone, I said quietly. I just refuse to treat people like gods when they're just teenagers with too much money and not enough supervision. You little... Jessica moved forward. That's enough. Daehyun's voice cut through the hallway like a knife. Everyone turned. Ashley's face lit up. Finally, he would deal with this upstart personally. But Daehyun wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his court with an expression none of them had seen before. Cold, disgusted. And what he said next would destroy his empire in under 60 seconds. 3 years of carefully constructed power, demolished by 3 simple sentences. "Did I tell you to do this?" His voice was dangerously soft. Ashley faltered. "No, but we thought—" "You thought wrong." He turned to me, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he spoke without condescension. "Are you okay?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with its pin pulled. I studied him with those assessing eyes, and Daehyun felt suddenly, uncomfortably seen. Not as King of Kingston Prep. As Daehyun Choi, 17, standing in a hallway realizing he'd built an empire on sand. "I'm fine," I said. "I've dealt with worse than mean girls with daddy's credit cards." Then I walked away. "Daehyun, we were just—" Ashley started. "You were bullying someone in my name, without my permission, without my knowledge." He let that sink in, making me look weak and out of control. "If you ever do that again, you're out. All of you." He left them there, shocked, and walked in the direction I'd gone. But wait. Because what happened next in that library would change absolutely everything. He found me in the poetry section, and I was about to tell him a truth that would shatter everything he thought he knew about power. I sat cross-legged on the library floor between poetry and philosophy, carefully transcribing notes from water-damaged papers into a fresh notebook. I didn't look up when he approached. "They won't bother you again," Daehyun said. "Because you commanded it?" I kept writing. "Great. Trading one form of control for another." "That's not—" He stopped, frustrated. "I didn't ask them to do that. But they did it. Because of you." I finally looked up, gaze sharp. "You built a system where people think terrorizing others makes you happy, where power means cruelty. And now you're surprised?" Daehyun had no response. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" The question slipped out. I set down my pen. "Why should I be? You're just a kid who's confused fear for respect for so long that you've forgotten what real power looks like." And what does real power look like? Not needing everyone to acknowledge you when you walk into a room. Security that doesn't require performance. I paused. Being someone people follow because they want to, not because they're afraid. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Daehyun sat down on the floor across from me. "Tell me about your old school," he said. "Why?" "Because I want to understand why you're different." I laughed softly. "I'm not different, Daehyun. I'm normal. You're the one who's forgotten what that looks like." And then I told him about Oakland Tech, about Marcus, about the tiny sophomore girl who changed everything. What I was about to tell him would unlock something he'd buried for 3 years. The memory of who he was before he became king. Oakland Tech, 3,000 students, metal detectors at every entrance, 42 students per classroom. My voice was matter of fact. I watched kids try to build kingdoms there too. Different tools than you. Actual threats, actual violence, but same principle. Control through fear. Daehyun listened, really listened. There was this senior, Marcus, ran half the school through intimidation, made freshmen pay protection fees, got teachers fired. Everyone was terrified. I pulled my knees up. Then one day, this tiny sophomore, couldn't have been more than 5 feet, walked right up to him and said no. What happened? He tried to save face, made threats, got his friends involved, but she never blinked. Just kept saying no, calmly, like it was the simplest thing in the world. I smiled at the memory. Within a month, his empire collapsed. Because once one person refused to be afraid, everyone else realized they could too. Fear only works if everyone agrees to participate. Daehyun felt something crack open in his chest. What happened to Marcus? Graduated, moved away, working at his dad's auto shop now, just another guy. I met his eyes. Turns out when you build everything on fear, nothing lasts. But that girl? Student body president now. Because she earned it. Here's where it gets crazy. Because I could see the exact moment Daehyun understood. The moment he realized his entire identity was a performance. And underneath, he had no idea who he actually was. I don't know how to be anything else, he admitted quietly. I glanced up, and for the first time, my expression softened. Sure you do. You just did it. You told them to stop. You sat down here instead of summoning me to your table. You asked instead of commanded. I tilted my head. You're capable of being human, Daehyun. You've just convinced yourself that humans equals weak. Doesn't it? At Kingston Prep. Only if you keep reinforcing that belief. I returned to transcribing. But that's your choice to make. He sat there for 10 more minutes, watching me work. When he finally stood to leave, he said, "Thank you." I looked genuinely surprised. For what? For treating me like a person instead of a king? My smile was small, but genuine. Anytime. Now watch closely, because what happened over the next 3 weeks would be the most terrifying thing Daehyun had ever done. He chose to be human. And it started with 3 words that would send shockwaves through Kingston Prep's entire social ecosystem. Friday morning, 7:43 a.m., Daehyun walked into Kingston Prep. The ecosystem shifted as always. But when Marcus Chen deliberately slowed his stride, Daehyun did something unprecedented. He nodded in greeting. Marcus nearly tripped. In the court group chat, Jimin, coffee run before 3rd period? Daehyun, can't. Meeting with college counselor, but thanks for asking. Sunho, are you feeling okay? Daehyun, I'm good. Just trying something different. At lunch, when Jessica started to sit at his table automatically, he spoke before she could settle. Actually, I need to talk to Tyler and Sunho, privately. A dismissal, but a gentle one, an explanation. Jessica looked confused but nodded. Baby steps. He found me on the soccer field bleachers. Same spot, same book. He climbed up and sat 2 rows below, not presuming to share my space. Good book? He asked. I glanced down, eyebrow raised. Are you actually asking, or is this some new intimidation strategy? Actually asking. I considered, then marked my page. Baldwin. Go tell it on the mountain. About finding yourself when everyone around you has already decided who you should be. Sounds relevant. Thought you might appreciate the theme. I closed the book. How's the dethroning going? Daehyun laughed. A real laugh that surprised us both. Slowly. Turns out when you've trained people to fear you, teaching them not to is complicated. I imagine. I studied him. What made you decide to change? Honestly, picking up my own pencil. He turned to look at me fully. And realizing I've been ruling an empire of nothing. Fear, money, intimidation, none of that's real. It evaporates the second you leave the room. And you want something real. Yeah, I do. But wait. Because what I said next, it would give him permission to be vulnerable for the first time in years. I was about to share a secret that would change how he saw absolutely everything. I was quiet for a moment. Then I shifted down to sit beside him, and Daehyun's heart rate spiked. Want to know a secret? I said softly. Always. That first day in chemistry, when you told me to pick up your pencil, I was terrified. Daehyun turned, shocked. You were? Terrified. New school, no friends, and the king was already testing me. I smiled ruefully. But I'd made a promise to myself that I wouldn't let fear make my decisions anymore. So I said no, even though my hands were shaking. I would never have known. That's the thing about courage, Daehyun. It's not the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite it. I bumped his shoulder gently. You're being courageous now. It just looks different than you expected. They sat in comfortable silence. Nyla? Yeah? Would you maybe want to have lunch together sometime? Actually together, I mean. I laughed, warm and genuine. I thought you'd never ask. Over the next 2 weeks, Kingston Prep witnessed something unprecedented. Daehyun Choi having an actual friend instead of subjects. If you're loving this transformation, hit that like button right now, because what comes next will absolutely wreck you in the best way. Daehyun and I became inseparable. I dragged him to my favorite art supply store in Oakland, where I spent 40 minutes agonizing over sketchbooks while he carried my basket and offered opinions on paper grain. He introduced me to the Korean BBQ place his family owned, teaching me how to grill meat properly while I teased him about his perfectionism. We studied together in the library, and he learned that I talked to myself while working through calculus. Okay, brain, we can do this. Which he found absurdly endearing. I came to his swim meet and screamed so loudly he nearly false-started from laughter. He attended my art club showcase and stood in front of my charcoal drawing, hands breaking chains for 20 minutes, understanding viscerally what I'd been trying to tell him. And slowly, Kingston Prep began to shift. Daehyun said good morning to people, held doors, thanked cafeteria staff by name. When a freshman dropped her books in front of him, he bent down and helped pick them up. The freshman nearly fainted, but not everyone welcomed the change. And Ashley Park? She was about to make her final move. 3 weeks into our friendship, Ashley cornered me in the bathroom between classes, flanked by Jessica and 2 others. You think you're special? Ashley's voice dripped venom. You think because Daehyun's slumming it with you that you matter? I washed my hands calmly. I think you're threatened because you never learned to exist without someone else's validation. That must be exhausting. You don't belong here. You're a charity case who got lucky. And you're a girl who's so insecure she needs to tear down others to feel tall. I dried my hands, meeting her glare. I actually feel sorry for you. Ashley's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. You need to learn your place. Let go of her. Daehyun's voice cut through the bathroom like ice. He stood in the doorway with an expression none of them had seen before. Not cold indifference. Something hotter. Protective. Daehyun! Ashley immediately released my wrist, smile bright and fake. We were just talking. You were threatening her. I heard every word. He moved between Ashley and me. And you laid hands on her, which crosses every line. She disrespected you. She challenged me to be better, to be real, to stop playing games and start being human. His voice was quiet but absolute. You're just upset because you can't control me anymore. Ashley's face crumpled. I defended you. I protected your reputation. No, you bullied people in my name to make yourself feel powerful. There's a difference. Daehyun softened slightly. Ashley, you're smart. You're capable. You don't need to be cruel to matter. But if you ever threaten Nyla again, we're done. Completely. He turned to me. You okay? I'm fine, I said. But maybe we should let them talk? Daehyun wanted to argue, but my eyes told him this was important. He nodded and stepped back. And what I did next? It was the most unexpected move in this entire story. I turned to Ashley with something unexpected. Empathy. Because I was about to give her the same gift someone once gave me, a chance to be better. I get it, I said. Change is scary. When the systems you've built your life around shift, it feels like you're disappearing. But Ashley, you're not defined by who you orbit. You're defined by who you choose to be when no one's watching. Ashley stared, tears welling. I don't know how to be anything else. Sure you do, you just haven't tried. I offered a small smile. And for what it's worth, I've seen you in AP Bio. You're brilliant. You don't need Daehyun's approval to be somebody. The bathroom fell silent. Then Ashley nodded once and left with her friends. Daehyun waited until we were alone. You didn't have to do that. Give her grace. Everyone deserves a chance to be better, even mean girls. I leaned against the sink. Besides, anger just perpetuates the cycle. Compassion breaks it. He moved closer, heart hammering. How are you this wise at 17? Therapy, mostly, and a really good aunt who doesn't let me get away with my own BS. I looked up at him, and the air crackled. Why did you come to the bathroom, Daehyun? Jimin texted that Ashley was cornering you. He paused. I couldn't stand the thought of you facing that alone. My hero, I said softly, warmth in my teasing. I'm serious. You've changed everything for me, Nyla. He took a breath. You make me want to be someone worthy of your respect. My eyes widened. Daehyun. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. I was quiet, then stepped forward and took his hand. Electricity. You already have my respect, I said. You earned it the day you sat on that library floor and listened. Everything since has just been confirmation. Just respect? His voice was barely a whisper. I smiled, mischievous and beautiful. Let's start there and see what happens. And what happens would involve Daehyun doing the most terrifying thing he'd ever done. Auditioning for the school play. Kingston Prep's Spring Festival was the social event of the year. This year, Drama Club was performing a modern Korean folktale, a warrior prince who learned that true strength came from compassion, not conquest. I was designing sets. Daehyun had never participated in drama, had never participated in anything that didn't directly benefit his image. But when I mentioned I was working on the production, he showed up to auditions. Mr. Reeves almost fell out of his chair. Daehyun Choi, you want to audition? If there's a role available. We need a lead, the warrior prince, but it's a significant commitment. Rehearsals every day, line memorization, emotional vulnerability. Mr. Reeves studied him skeptically. This isn't about padding a college application? No, sir, it's about trying something that scares me. Something in his honesty resonated. Mr. Reeves handed him the script. Show me what you've got. Daehyun read, a scene where the prince confronts his own arrogance and realizes his pursuit of power has isolated him from everyone who matters. The words felt uncomfortably familiar. When he finished, silence. Then Mr. Reeves smiled. Congratulations, you're our prince. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind that would push Daehyun further than he'd ever gone. Because acting meant dropping every defense and letting people see his raw, unguarded self. Daehyun discovered that memorizing lines was harder than calculus. That stage combat required vulnerability and trust. That acting meant being seen. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. I worked on the set during his rehearsals, painting backdrops and constructing props. During breaks, we'd sit together, and I'd quiz him on lines while adding details to my artwork. You're getting better? I said one afternoon, adding shadow to a painted mountain. That scene in Act 2 actually made me tear up. Because it was good or terrible? Because it was real. You weren't performing. You were just there, present, honest. I set down my brush. I'm proud of you. Warmth bloomed in his chest. For acting in a school play? For being brave enough to try something new? For letting people see you be imperfect? I smiled. The old Daehyun would never have risked looking foolish. The old Daehyun was an idiot. The old Daehyun was scared. There's a difference. He moved closer. And the new Daehyun? is still figuring things out. But he's doing it honestly, which is all that matters. My voice softened. And he's not alone anymore. The moment stretched, charged and fragile. Then Mr. Reeves called for places. But the feeling remained. Opening night arrived, and Daehyun was about to deliver a performance that would leave the entire school speechless. Backstage was chaos. Students rushed in costumes, adjusting props, running through last-minute changes. The air smelled like hairspray and nervous sweat. Daehyun stood in the wings, dressed in traditional Korean warrior attire, trying to remember how to breathe. "You've got this." I appeared beside him, paint smudged on my cheek, eyes bright. What if I freeze? What if I forget my lines? What if... I took his face in both hands, forcing him to look at me. "Then you'll improvise. You'll breathe. You'll remember that this is just a play, and your worth isn't determined by one performance." My thumbs brushed his cheekbones. "But you won't freeze. Because I've watched you rehearse this 100 times, and you know this character better than anyone. You are this character. An arrogant prince learning to be human. A person discovering that vulnerability is the highest form of strength." I smiled. "Sound familiar?" Before he could respond, I pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Break a leg, warrior prince." Then I disappeared, leaving him touching his cheek and smiling like an idiot. And what happened next? The performance of his life. The curtain rose and Daehyun stepped into the spotlight. Not as a king, as someone finally, bravely human. The play was magnificent. From the moment the curtain rose, the audience was captivated. The story unfolded. The prince's journey from tyrannical ruler to compassionate leader, guided by a wise artist who saw through his facades. Art imitating life, imitating art. In the climactic scene, the prince confronts his greatest enemy, his own reflection. The staging was simple, just Daehyun, a mirror prop, and a spotlight. "I ruled through fear," he said, voice raw. "I demanded loyalty I never earned. I confused power with worth, control with connection, and I lost everything that mattered because I was too proud to admit I was just scared." The confession hung in the air, scared of being ordinary, scared of being vulnerable, scared that without the armor of arrogance, no one would see me at all. He moved closer to the mirror. But the truth is, no one ever saw me with it either. They saw a throne, a title, a performance. Never the person beneath. Students who'd known the old Daehyun shifted uncomfortably, recognizing their own complicity. So I choose differently now. I choose honesty over image, connection over control, respect over fear. His voice strengthened. "And if that makes me weak by the old standards, then let me be weak. Because I've learned that true strength is having nothing to prove." The final scene showed the prince, stripped of crown and royal garments, working alongside common people to rebuild the kingdom he'd nearly destroyed. The artist approaches. He bows. Not in subservience, but in genuine respect. "You were right," he tells her. "About everything." "I was persistent," she corrects. "You were brave enough to listen. Will you stay? Help me build something real?" She takes his hand. "I thought you'd never ask." The lights fade as they stand together. Equals, partners, no thrones between them. The applause was thunderous. After the show, Daehyun had one mission: find the girl who'd changed everything. And what he was about to ask her? It would complete his transformation. The lobby overflowed with students, parents, teachers offering congratulations. Daehyun accepted praise graciously, but his eyes kept scanning. He found me near my set pieces talking with my aunt, a tall woman with the same warm smile and sharp eyes. "There he is," my aunt said. "The warrior prince himself." "Young man, that was extraordinary." Thank you, ma'am, though I had excellent source material. He smiled at me. Your niece is an incredible artist. Don't I know it? She's been sketching since she could hold a pencil. My aunt glanced between us, something knowing in her expression. Nyla, honey, I'm going to grab the car. Take your time. Saying goodbye. When we were alone, I tilted my head. So, how does it feel? Your first standing ovation. Surreal. Terrifying. Amazing. Daehyun ran a hand through his hair. But mostly I kept thinking about you. How this whole journey started because you refused to pick up a pencil. Best decision I ever made. Really? Really. Because I got to watch someone choose to be better. That's rare, Daehyun. He stepped closer. The lobby noise faded. You know that line in the play? Where the prince asks the artist to stay? I wrote that line, I admitted. Mr. Reeves let me contribute dialogue revisions. You wrote it? I wanted to make sure he got the ending right. That he didn't just transform alone, that he had someone who saw his worth even when he couldn't. I looked up, vulnerable. Art, imitating life, remember? Daehyun's heart hammered. So when I asked if you'd stay, help me build something real, I was answering honestly. I thought you'd never ask. He was about to do the bravest thing he'd ever done. Braver than facing his father. Braver than stepping on that stage. Braver than anything. He cupped my face gently. Nyla Monroe, will you go to the Spring Festival dance with me tomorrow? Not as a statement or a performance. Just as two people who want to spend time together. I'll go, I whispered. But only if you promise me something. Anything? Promise you won't go back to being the old Daehyun. That throne was always empty. But the person standing here right now? He's full of light. I promise. That person is dead. This is who I want to be. Who I am. He leaned closer. Someone worthy of you. You were always worthy, Dehyan. You just needed to believe it. Then I kissed him. Soft and sweet and certain, and Dehyan understood finally what power really meant. Not control, not fear, not dominance. Connection. Truth. The courage to be seen completely. When we broke apart, both smiling, he saw Tyler and Sunho, watching from across the lobby, grinning like idiots. Ashley stood nearby, and when she caught his eye, she offered a small, genuine smile and a thumbs up. No kingdom, no subjects, no throne, just people. Real, flawed, trying their best. It was infinitely better. The Spring Festival dance was 24 hours away, and what happened there would seal everything we'd built together. But first, Daehyun had to face the final test, his father's reaction to his transformation. That night, Daehyun sat at dinner with his father in their mansion's formal dining room, minimalist design, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture worth more than cars. His father set down his wineglass. I heard about your performance tonight. Daehyun's spine stiffened. From who? The head of the board was there. His daughter attends Kingston Prep. His father studied him. He said you were vulnerable, emotional, that you played a prince who gave up his power. Here it comes, Daehyun thought. He said it was the most moving performance he'd ever seen from a high school student. Daehyun blinked. What? He was impressed, Daehyun. Said you showed depth he didn't know you had. His father's expression was unreadable. I've been watching you these past few weeks. The changes. The girl. Nyla. Nyla, his father repeated. Your mother likes her. Says she has substance. She does. His father was quiet for a long moment. I built our empire on strength, Daehyun. On never showing weakness. I thought I was teaching you to do the same. You were. But watching you tonight, watching how the audience responded to your honesty, your vulnerability, I realized something. His father met his eyes. Maybe I've been confusing strength with armor, and maybe real strength is what you showed tonight. The courage to be seen. Daehyun felt something crack in his chest. Dad, I'm proud of you, son. Not for the performance, for the person you're becoming. His father's voice was soft. Your Nyla is lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have her. It was the first real conversation they'd had in 3 years. The dance was tomorrow. The transformation was complete. But would Daehyun's new self survive the final test? Being vulnerable in front of the entire school? The spring festival dance transformed the gymnasium into something magical. Thousands of string lights, student artwork on the walls, a DJ who actually took requests. Daehyun arrived in a tailored navy suit, heart racing. Then he saw me. I wore a gold dress that caught the light like captured sunshine. Natural curls adorned with delicate pins. I was breathtaking. Not manufactured beauty, but authentic radiance. I saw him and smiled, and Daehyun forgot how to breathe. You clean up nice, warrior prince, I said. You're stunning. The words felt inadequate. Nyla, you're absolutely stunning. I know. I grinned, taking his offered arm. Shall we dance? The night unfolded like a dream. They danced to fast songs and slow songs, laughing when Daehyun admitted he'd taken ballroom lessons, but never actually enjoyed dancing until now. They grabbed punch and sat on the bleachers, people watching and creating elaborate backstories for other couples. They snuck out to the courtyard when the gym got too crowded, and Daehyun pointed out constellations while I sketched them. You came prepared, he noted. Artist's habit. I added details to Orion's belt. Though mostly I wanted to capture this, tonight. How it feels. And how does it feel? I looked at him, eyes reflecting starlight. Like beginning. Like possibility. Like everything that matters has nothing to do with crowns and everything to do with choosing each other over and over. Daehyun pulled me close. I choose you, Nyla. Not just tonight. Every day. In every way that matters. I choose you too. The real you. Imperfect. Evolving. Brave you. I rested my head against his chest. My favorite you. They swayed to music filtering from the gym, creating their own rhythm under the stars. Inside, something was happening that would prove the transformation was complete. Something beautiful. Inside, students who'd once feared Daehyun now saw him laughing, dancing, being young and gloriously free. The whispers weren't about intimidation, they were about transformation, about how love, real love built on respect and honesty, could rewrite entire narratives. When the final song played, Daehyun and Nyla returned to the gym. The DJ announced the last dance, and couples filled the floor. As they moved together, Daehyun caught their reflection in the gym's window. Not a king and his subject, not a prince and an artist, just two people, equal and connected, building something real. Thank you, he whispered into my hair. For what? For refusing to bow, for challenging me, for seeing potential where everyone else saw only arrogance. He pulled back to look at me. For being exactly who you are. My eyes glistened. Thank you for listening, for changing, for proving that people can grow if they're brave enough to try. The song ended. The lights came up. The festival concluded. But for Daehyun and Nyla, everything was just beginning. Monday morning, Daehyun walked into Kingston Prep at 7:43 a.m., but this time, when people saw him, they smiled. Actually smiled. Morning, Daehyun, called Jamie, a sophomore. Good morning, Jamie. How was your weekend? Such a simple exchange. But it represented everything. I met him at his locker, sliding my hand into his like it belonged there. Ready for another week? With you? Always. They walked to class together, and nobody thought it strange that the former king now shared his space with someone who'd once been an outsider. because the truth was visible to anyone paying attention. Daehyun hadn't lost anything by stepping down from his throne. He'd gained everything. In AP Literature, when Mr. Brennan asked for volunteers to read essays on power dynamics, both Daehyun and Nyla raised their hands. "Mr. Choi," Brennan said with barely concealed delight, "please share." Daehyun stood and began to read. "True power lies not in how many people fear you, but in how many people trust you. Not in how much you can take, but in how much you can give. Not in standing above others, but in standing beside them as equals. I learned this lesson the hard way, but I'm grateful for the teacher who refused to let me stay comfortable in my ignorance. Real strength, I've discovered, is having nothing to prove and everything to offer." The classroom erupted in genuine applause. I caught his eye and mouthed, "Proud of you." And Daehyun, for the first time in his life, was proud of himself too. Not for the throne he'd built, for the courage it took to walk away from it, for the wisdom to recognize that some queens don't bow, they elevate, and for the love that taught him the difference. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me what transformation meant most to you. Was it Daehyun's journey from fear to respect? Nyla's unwavering courage? The way love rebuilt what arrogance destroyed? Remember, real power isn't about control, it's about connection. It's about choosing growth over comfort, honesty over performance, love over fear. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time. Keep choosing to be brave. Keep choosing to be real. Keep choosing love. This is your storyteller, signing off. See you in the next story.